Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, we are here on a Tuesday at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Just finished up speaking with head coach Ryan Day, special teams coordinator and assistant secondary coach Matt Barnes, wide receivers coach Brian Hartline, wide receiver Austin Mack, offensive lineman Jonah Jackson, defensive tackle Jayshon Cornell, and quarterback Justin Fields. And I got them all right again, second week in a row. Boom. And no, not in the right order, but still got them right.
Still got them right, and so that's good. We had some interesting stuff we heard today. I have greatly, by the way, enjoyed having 1-800-BAND back as part of the program.
Yeah.
Our wonderful
Me
theme
too.
song, which had sort of fallen off the radar for a while, but I think that's, more than anything else, that's what makes these shows really, truly worth listening to.
Yeah, and really that was just me deciding, you know what, I don't have to be lazy and just upload the show without putting some sort of something to it, like any type of effort. And so that's what that is. That is any type of effort. And for me and for the listeners, because I enjoy it, and it's good to have it back. Tom, today, it's Nebraska week. This was our first venture to campus with the Nebraska game looming. And game day is going to be there this weekend. I'm not sure if you were. I'm pretty sure you were, because you read about it just like I did. And you knew about it just like I did beforehand. Anyway, and you also, I believe, wrote something.
Wrote an article. So yeah, it did cross my mind.
Did you read that? Did you read what you wrote?
No, I didn't. Was
Okay.
it good?
I
bet it was good.
I just clicked on it. I don't read stuff. So this is the 45th time Ohio State will be at a game where game day is. They have a 31-13 record. Tom, that might be a pretty good score, prediction score for this game, if Nebraska could hold Ohio State to 31 points.
That's a pretty remarkable record when you think about it, because you're playing, if you're at a college game day game, you are at least at one of the best games of the week, or one of the best games of the week that is being televised on a network that is part of the Disney family of networks. Those are generally the two criteria for being a college game day game, which means you're playing a pretty good opponent. So to be 31-13, that's probably about a 700 winning percentage. I mean, that's a 700 winning percentage is basically like almost a 9-3 kind of season, like between an 8-4 and 9-3 kind of season. If you're doing that, and you're presumably doing it mostly against like top 10 type competition, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, Ohio State has, like I said, 45 times. That's second only to Alabama at 46. It might be interesting to see if Alabama's game notes, I'm sure, probably has their record in there somewhere as well. The most notable thing for me today was when Ryan Day was asked about Nebraska, he said, got a real big challenge ahead of us this week. And he, truer words. I mean, how profound, what a statement. Got a real big challenge ahead of us this week. And there are a number of challenges, Tom, because you've got Adrian Martinez. He said by far the best quarterback they've played. They had the best group of wide receivers, playmakers. I don't know. There's some questions about if everybody's going to be healthy. So there may be some help that the Buckeyes get there. But they've got quick dudes. You know, we were talking about Wan'Dale Robinson, J.D. Spielman, the Marcus Washington kid, another guy. I think he might be out, but all of these guys can score from anywhere. And you know, we go into the Cincinnati game, we go into the Indiana game, talking about how this secondary is going to be tested. But now they're going to be tested by guys they're going to stretch the field wide, and they're also going to be dealing with a quarterback that can, go 60 yards running or passing at any moment. So this is by far the biggest test for this Ohio State secondary. And I, for one, am looking to see how it goes, because they match. Ohio State has three corners that might be the three best corners in the Big Ten. And you give them an opportunity to match up against some smaller, some quicker guys. I think they're going to give up plays, but if, they say games are won in the trenches, but might this be a game where, it's always going to be true down in the trenches, but whoever wins that battle out wide and outside, that might actually determine the game as well?
It's going to be one in the trenches. You're going to have plays here and there that will determine whether it's a 31-13 game or a 38-20 game or whatever the point differential is. You'll make plays. I mean, a couple weeks ago we made the synchronized skating analogy. This year we're going to go back to World War I, where there's like an apocryphal old story at the end of the war where a couple pilots are drinking in a bar somewhere, and then there's some generals, and the war is over, and the generals look over at the pilots and go, "Oh, who won the air war?" Like that's a thing, and that's like, "Oh, good for you, you won the air war." It didn't decide the actual. Yeah. J.D. Spielman is a playmaker. J.D. Spielman had like a 77-yard touchdown against Ohio State 2 years ago at Nebraska. He's someone that could bust one against Ohio State this weekend. They have guys who can make plays. This is not the Miami game where, the recess, Ohio State had the first 85 picks. There are players on Nebraska's team that Ohio State would have picked. Ohio State brought in Wan'Dale Robinson for an official visit last year, and then he chose Nebraska over Ohio State. They brought in Adrian Martinez for an official visit last year, maybe an unofficial. But they never offered him a scholarship, and that was just based solely on the fact that he had a shoulder injury and didn't play as a senior. And Ryan Day said they liked him a lot, that he was a great kid, loved his family, had a great connection with him, but just ultimately decided they couldn't do it just because of the uncertainty with his shoulder and his health, and that's obviously worked out fine. He has proven to be a more than capable college quarterback over the last couple of years. So there are players on this Nebraska team that are Ohio State caliber players. And, Ohio State still has a depth advantage. Ohio State has probably, again, a fairly substantial advantage in the trenches. That's probably where this game is going to be decided. But this is probably not, because of the much more even skill, this is probably not going to be a 42-0, 51-10 type game. It's probably going to be a little bit closer than that. So
last week, we you used your daughter's synchronized skating, and then this week you used your son's World War I reenactment crew as analogies, which I think is great to involve your family like that. The trenches is obviously, this is going to be a defensive line from Nebraska that has some big dudes that Ohio State is going to have to push around. None of the offensive linemen from Ohio State graded out as champions this past weekend, and that might be a combination of, they didn't have enough plays, or they maybe missed some assignments in their limited amount of plays, which skewed the grade a little bit, or maybe they decided, we're going to grade them tough for this week just to increase their level of attention. For whatever reason, none of them graded champions. And so they can't be feeling too fat and happy coming into this game. Not that they would, but I think it probably renews their focus to know, like, there is a standard and we have to continue to meet it. And this week, above all else, they need to meet and maybe even exceed that standard against the Nebraska defense. We're not saying Nebraska's defense is one of the 4 or 5 best in the Big Ten. I don't know that they are. Maybe 5th best. I don't think they're as good as they need to be to handle the Ohio State offense. And as you said, Tom, this is going to be one up front. And Nebraska's defensive line, we'll probably get into it more later in the week. But just offhand, without even watching too much of Nebraska yet, I just can't envision them having the talent and depth up front to be able to contain Ohio State, to stifle them as much as they need to in order to keep Ohio State, under 31. It's going to be their biggest challenge to date, the Nebraska defensive line, and we'll see if they're up for it. It would surprise me if they are, though.
Right. That's not a team that is as bad as you would think, based on a 42-38 score against Illinois. That was pretty misleading. Yeah. Nebraska ran up a huge advantage in total yardage. I mean, it was 600 and something to 300 and something. And it was the close score and Illinois having a lead for a bunch of the game was really a function of a bunch of turnovers and a bunch of short fields and all of that kind of stuff. But Illinois was able to run the ball, and that should be a concern for Nebraska. Illinois couldn't pass the ball at all.
Well,
I mean, not even a little bit. And Brandon Peters is not a particularly great quarterback, and they have some deficiencies elsewhere on that offense. But for Illinois to be able to run the ball against them a little bit that has to be pretty concerning for the Huskers coming into this weekend, because I would expect Ohio State to probably try and lean on that run a little bit. And I don't think we've seen everything that the Justin Fields read option kind of offense has to offer. I think they've kept it a little bit plain. They've limited his rushes. Fields said on Tuesday, they haven't specifically told him, like, we're not going to run you as much in these early games against these crappy teams, because they would never call anyone a crappy team, Gerd. They take every opponent very seriously.
I believe they call them wiener teams.
Yes. They haven't specifically told Fields, we're not running you as much now, but we might run you more later. Fields said basically it's just manage your contact more or less. Yeah. Get down, don't get drilled. But I would expect to see probably a little bit more running out of him. Mm-hmm. But with the Ohio State offensive line playing pretty well, and what I think there's a pretty good chance that was a motivational tactic to not call them champions last week, because if you score 76 points and give up 5 and your list of champions is much shorter than a normal week of champions, there's probably a little bit of psychology going into that. Because last week we had kind of, not surly Ryan Day, but a little bit, a little bit gruff. This week he was kind of a little more jokey. He had some times when he was funny and laughed at people and all that. But I think that maybe that what we saw out of those with that champions that you mentioned, like that may be a motivational thing that they were trying to do. Yeah, and
you wouldn't put it past a disciple of Urban Meyer to go ahead and dip into that sort of stuff. Yeah, so Illinois, 38 carries for 221 yards and 4 touchdowns last week against Nebraska, 5.82 yards per carry. Now, they did do a good job against Colorado in week 2. I don't know what kind of running game Colorado has, but they held their first 3 opponents to 89 yards, which was Colorado, and then 74 yards. But that's South Alabama, that's Colorado, and that's Northern Illinois. They get to Illinois, who has some good running backs, and then you see what happens. And that's with Brandon Peters, who is not really a dynamic running threat. But yeah, I think I wrote in 10 things after the Miami game that we're going to start seeing Justin Fields running more. This is one of those games where he said it on Tuesday, I'll do whatever it takes. However many times, basically whatever is necessary to win, he's willing to do. And this is one of those things where you're not just running him in the red zone, I don't think. I think you run him at your own 25-yard line, and then 20 yards later after a carry, now you've already progressed through that plan to win where they want 2 first downs, so that now if they have to punt, they can pin the opponent, and you can get that one fell swoop with any of those read options. And I think the more you do it, or at least the more you show it, then the more that's going to help JK and Master Teague as well. And especially on the road, if you can control the running game, then you can stifle whatever you want. And I know Ryan Day doesn't care about the clock, but there are times when he will slow things down just to maintain control a little bit longer. So, I have confidence that the Ohio State running game will be okay in this one. I don't know that once you get into that play action, I think they're going to start taking some more shots. I haven't watched Nebraska enough to really get a feel for what they're going to do. But this Ohio State offense, it's all coming together very well. And I would hate to have to be the defensive coordinator who is looking at this and thinking, well, we can do this and it might work for 2 drives, but then something else is going to happen. And you're almost always playing catch up against an offense that can do anything with so many different guys.
Well, I mean, the defense's goal is always to make the offense one-dimensional. That's kind of the first. number one is don't give up any points, but functionally the way you do that is you try and make an offense one-dimensional. And that's just not that easy with this Ohio State team, because even if you try and really sell out to stop the run, there's so many different targets that they have downfield. And it's not like, okay, we have to really stop the run and then just cover this one guy who's a really good receiver. Like, I mean, you'll have teams like that where it's like, okay, you're going to sell it to stop the run, and you're going to put, throw a safety who's always on the same side of the field as the other team's number one receiver, and then just go, well, if these other guys beat us, these other guys beat us. You can't do that against Ohio State. That's if you go and you say, okay, well, we're just not going to let KJ Hill beat us. Like, okay, that's fine. There are 5 or 6 other receivers in that room who are perfectly happy to beat you on one-on-one coverage, because Ohio State's depth at receiver is much better than the depth at corner that pretty much every team they're going to play this season has. So you if you do that, you're going to put yourself in a losing matchup. There is a reason Ohio State is coming into this game as a 16.5-point favorite on the road. It's because they have better skill position, kind of better skill basically across the deck, in the trenches, in the skill positions, on defense. Nebraska is a better team. This is going to be a better test than we've seen so far. But Ohio State has better personnel, and I would say, Nebraska has, especially on the offensive side of the ball, some pretty good offensive minds on that coaching staff. But Nebraska does not have a decided schematic advantage this weekend to steal a line from one of college football's lesser philosophers.
Yeah, that would be. Is that his Wikipedia title, Charlie Weiss? The Nebraska defense, they're going to be. They can try to sell out for the run, and that's fine, but then something happens over top of them, or even the most, disheartening thing is if you do sell out to stop the run and they're still running the ball on you. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about Michigan later, don't worry. But when a team can do whatever they want, and Ohio State, I believe their total offense, I think they've rushed for maybe 18 more yards than they've thrown for this year. Mm-hmm. So that gives you an idea of the kind of balance that Nebraska is going to be trying to stop. And, and it's not just JK running it, it's Fields, it's Master Teague, and it's not just, like you said, it's not just KJ catching it. It's all of these different guys rotating in, staying fresh. And the depth is so difficult for other teams to face, and that's offense and defense. And talking about defense, when we talked to Jayshon Cornell today. He was asked about Chase Young, and I believe one of his quotes was, Chase Young is Chase Young.
Facts only.
Something to that effect. And you're like, that is true. You are absolutely right about that, because nobody else is Chase Young. And we're seeing that. And I can't wait to watch what this defense does against the Adrian Martinez effect. Cornell said that they're going to try to keep him, contained, try to close in on him.
Close the pocket on him, yeah.
And, Cornell will go up the middle, and the ends will come around and close the pocket and try to keep him looped in there. And you wonder how much rolling out they'll do, away from Chase Young. Mm-hmm. So maybe do you play Chase Young on the left side of the line to intercept that rollout? Or, it's going to be fun to watch just how they combat that running threat. And they're going to have to do it for all 4 quarters. And that's something that Ryan Day says they haven't had to do yet, and we'll see.
Yeah, this is where, not having played Michael Penix at Indiana, you would probably have a better sense for what they were going to do in this kind of situation. They have not really played a quarterback that's been as good as Martinez with the skill set that Martinez has. Penix is not as good as Martinez, but Peyton Ramsey did not give you that look at Indiana. Martinez just last week, 121 yards on 16 carries. That's 7.5 yards per carry against Illinois. And again, Illinois is Illinois, and that's just not quite an Ohio State level defense. Just to kind of be blunt about it, this year, in my opinion. But he's someone who can hurt you, and that's not, Adrian Martinez is not someone who's going to win the game all by himself with his legs, but that's kind of what we talked about with like J.D. Spielman on the outside. He's not going to win the game by himself, but he can make a play here or there that can add 7 points to their total, add 14 points to their total, and you have enough of those, then it adds up, and that can ultimately decide the game. This is going to be a week that it's just going to be important for Ohio State to just play like assignment sound football. Don't get too crazy. They have kind of been able to tee off on people the last few weeks, and it hasn't been as important for them to really, hold the edge, rush with discipline, all of that. And this weekend it's a little more important. So it'll be interesting to see whether they can play aggressive but under control. That's something you hear coaches talk about a lot. This is a week when that really is going to matter.
We'll see what they do with linebackers. This is more of a Baron Browning game than a Tough Moreland game. Mm-hmm. Perhaps more of a Brendan White game than a Pete Werner game, because they'll be spread out. And we saw last year, Pete Werner is not the best matchup for J.D. Spielman.
No.
I know. Maybe Greg Schiano thought it was, but in fact, if you go back and look at the tape, it was not the best move. And so maybe this year, and I'm not saying Brendan White can shut down J.D. Spielman. He's very difficult to handle for corners. But I think Brendan White gives you a better chance. And maybe this is where we see more of the bullet and why it was brought here. And this is what it was for. And this is the type of versatile offense that this defense will combat. And do you spy Malik Harrison? Because I don't know that it makes sense to spy Tough Moreland.
Mm-hmm. No, that's not. This is the issue.
Like
This is the
Mr.
issue.
Bean of spies, basically, for the football equivalency, and that's a terrible thing to say, but he's not the guy that you want trying to chase down a 4-6 quarterback.
Well, right. That's not a slight on Tough Moreland. No. That is, Chase Young is probably not the guy you would necessarily want in that role either, just because Chase Young is a remarkable player. But there are certain roles, like you don't want Chase Young out covering J.D. Spielman either, because that's not a winning matchup for him. So
you better lock him up at the line. if you're gonna.
Probably. Like I guess I'm saying that I'm like, maybe I don't know.
Watch it once.
Yeah, exactly. It is a probably, I don't know. And this is maybe my most comprehensive thought ever. I know in podcast history.
Let me hit record.
This is a case of just putting players in the right position to succeed. And that's something that the coaching staff did not do last year, and a lot of that blame got lumped on the players. But if you're not put in a position to succeed, you're probably not going to succeed. They have the tool set this year with these different spots with the bullet position now, where they can put, maybe it's Brendan White on J.D. Spielman, maybe put Sean Wade on J.D. Spielman, right, and let him. That probably would not be the worst idea to just put a true corner.
Some of that, yes.
Put a true corner on him, and Brendan White maybe covering Wan'Dale Robinson out of the backfield, something like that. But you have options this year. You have 3 corners who are playing at a very high level, which is, that's a pretty good start to locking down an opposing offense. You have the bullet position. You have Jordan Fuller on the back end, who's been a pretty good kind of deep safety, not letting anyone get past him. Just all of those things together, that puts you in a pretty good spot to stop or at least contain pretty much any offense.
And while they are working to contain Adrian Martinez, it was interesting. Jay Sean Cornell said, anybody can get sacks. We want sacks and fumbles. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they're shooting for, and they've been successful at that this season. And they're tied for the lead in the nation with sacks. I think they've got 19 now in 4 games. So Adrian Martinez, he runs anyway. He's going to be running more this week. It may not be forward. Mm-hmm. It may be east and west and backwards. But he's going to have a very, very busy evening Saturday night in Lincoln. And 4-quarter game. I don't know if we'll see it, mm-hmm, but they are preparing. Ohio State is preparing for it. I don't know if it's going to go 4 quarters, but we'll talk about that. You mentioned putting players in positions to succeed, and I just want to mention this real quick because I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it. The Michigan game against Wisconsin. Michigan got beat really badly. I don't know if anybody saw it.
Well, did they? I didn't see that.
The score was 35-14. In fact, at one point it was 35-21, but a touchdown was called back.
But what was the score at halftime? I bet it was much closer at halftime.
No, I believe it was 28-0, and then eventually the score was 35-0.
Who was winning at that point?
I would have to go back. I believe it was Wisconsin.
Okay, all right.
So there's this one point down in the red zone. Wisconsin had the ball near the goal line, and Wisconsin, they like to run the ball. With a bunch of offensive linemen and a pretty good running back. And Michigan had Jordan Glasgow,
Is he like a big, 400-pound Samoan guy?
In fact, he is not. He's not big or Samoan.
That's two strikes right there.
Right, correct. He is a former safety walk-on who is now an inside linebacker. But several times throughout this game, he was actually up on the defensive line, kind of as a 3 technique, not unlike what Ohio State did with their linebackers at times last year. But here, Glasgow was asked to take on the left guard immediately on a short yardage situation. And Tom, when you want to put your players in a position to succeed, do you normally put a 215-pound dude over top of a, say, 320-pound dude with steak sauce all over him, getting ready to be eaten by a Badger offensive lineman? Because that is exactly what happened. He got rolled up and pushed 4 yards into the end zone, and the Michigan had no chance in that game. It was an unwinnable game for them because defensively they had nothing. Offensively, they are completely shot right now, and this is a program that is going to have to fight for 8 wins. I'll just say it.
Yeah, 8 wins is probably about right. I mean, they've got some losable games coming up. They're going to win the next couple, unless the roof really falls in. But you've got Rutgers this week,
and then Iowa.
Oh, you've got Iowa at home. They should beat Iowa at home. Then they have Illinois, I believe, the week after that. But
on the road,
yeah, and Iowa at home is losable. Illinois on the road, if they can't stop the run, Illinois on the road is suddenly
Brandon Peters, motivated.
Illinois on the road is, that's like a 80% chance you're going to win that game. But you should win that game. But if Illinois can run the ball, I mean, you can get one of those 2007 Ohio State Illinois games where it's just you can't get Illinois' offense off the field. And it wasn't just Nebraska's defense that Illinois has done that to. They have to be smart enough to realize, okay, hey, we can't pass the ball at all, so we need to stick with the run, because I think Brandon Peters had 20 pass attempts for 50 yards or something against Nebraska, which 2.5 yards per attempt as a quarterback passing, that probably doesn't grade out as a champion. Just put it that way. But yeah, that's all of a sudden there are games that were solidly in the win column that are now probably wins, and there are some probably wins that are maybe wins, and there are some maybe wins that are maybe if everything breaks right kind of wins. Because
stuff like going to Illinois, going to Maryland, before the season, those are wins.
Yes.
Now you actually get to this point and you're and as I wrote in Michigan Monday, every team on their schedule, save for the one this week, is going to go into that game thinking they have a really good shot to win. Others will go in knowing more than, they'll be, yes, we're going to win. That sort of thing. But every team is going to feel like Michigan is beatable.
Right. And
they're not wrong.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where this is kind of like a variant of the Ohio State gets everyone's best shot kind of thing. Everyone wants to beat Ohio State because that's kind of a statement win. Michigan's a little different this year because it's everyone wants to beat Michigan because Michigan's kind of got that brand name. But it's also, there's something about going into a game where it's and actually there's a plausible chance that you could beat them.
Right.
You're not going in as a 35-point underdog. If you're going into a game against a team that's kind of like a potential resume win, like Lovie Smith, for example. Lovie Smith, his job status has been a little up in the air. If he can go in and beat Michigan, then that's a whole different, that changes everything for him. that changes, then that's something they can point to on the recruiting trail is, hey, look, we're really turning around. That's something he can take to his athletic director and go, look, hey, I know you're not going to fire me because I have a ridiculous buyout, but also I beat Michigan. And then that becomes the game where you're really throwing the kitchen sink at it. Because I think what you see with Ohio State sometimes is teams will throw a bunch of junk at them at the beginning of the game, see how it goes, and then if it's, then if it doesn't, you're down 21-5 in the second quarter, then okay, we're not going to expend any more of this stuff. We're going to save this for junk. Yes, we're going to save this for a game that we have a chance to win. You're gonna get the kitchen sink if you have the potential to be a signature win for someone else, and that continues to be true throughout the course of the game. That's when all the 2-point plays, all the trick plays, all the anything.
Yeah.
That all comes out. No use saving it for next week. We'll worry about it next week.
Plus, momentum is a real thing,
mm-hmm.
Especially at home. You mentioned you can't be fired after beating Michigan. It's still maybe the most damning thing about Rich Rodriguez, how terrible things were at Michigan, is Tom Amstutz with Toledo beats Michigan, still gets fired that season because not even beating Michigan back then was good enough to save your job. And I apologize for the tangent on Michigan, but I don't think anybody minds.
I was going to say, based on what I know about our listenership and their fandom, I'm sure that a little bit of so Michigan got their heads kicked in talk is probably not going to offend anyone too deeply.
And the good thing is for our listeners, they knew this was coming because we had been warning them during the off season.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at how Michigan's defense looks. I'm a little surprised at how Michigan's offense looks. Like that offensive line is not what it should be right now. Shea Patterson is not what I think there was sort of an expectation that Shea Patterson would maybe take another step in the way that like Joe Burrow has taken a step with his second year in a grad transfer program. Normally that's the case, and I think that's what we're probably both anticipating for Justin Fields next year at Ohio State as well. That hasn't happened with Shea Patterson. And Dylan McCaffrey hasn't happened at Michigan. And Joe Milton hasn't happened at Michigan. And it's like, well, and Nico Collins, like I don't know what it takes to get Michigan to throw the ball to Nico Collins. Like, you have this really good tall receiver.
Yeah.
Just heave up some arm punts to him. Like,
and that's what they finally did at the end.
Yeah, but like this has not been like this has been something that they should have been doing for 2 years now.
Especially against Army, they should have been just chucking it up to those guys. You mentioned quarterbacks getting. Who was the last Michigan quarterback that came back and was noticeably better than the year before? I mean, maybe Denard Robinson. Even Devin Gardner as a senior had a great game against Ohio State, but he was a bad quarterback that year.
Yeah, they were not a good year.
Denard Robinson was never great. He had some moments of greatness, but I don't know that he was probably progressed better than Taylor Martinez at Nebraska, who was just a flat line the entire 4 years. But you don't really see that. And it goes way back to Chad Henne, even as a freshman, was a starter.
Yeah, but I'm working my way back. And Chad Henne, like his third year, they were pretty good. He was hurt his fourth year, or they probably would have been better.
They were number 2 team in the nation his third year.
But yeah, Chad Henne is honestly probably the answer. And that's 3 administrations ago.
Yeah, that's 4 total coaches, and who knows how many quarterbacks, coaches, and really. But to bring that to today. For me, just the lack of development from Jim Harbaugh. I thought that was the one thing that they were getting for sure, was the guy who would be able to get the most out of his players, because you have to at Stanford, but maybe you don't because you're just playing in the Pac-12.
Yeah, well, and then the real question is, okay, he really got the most out of Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
So was that a Jim Harbaugh thing, or was that an Andrew Luck thing?
It's like when Notre Dame fans were convinced that Charlie Weiss created and made Tom Brady into this amazing NFL quarterback. And I don't think you can chalk up being one of the all-time greats to a coach. You're either that guy, that player. Like Tom Brady is not the product of Charlie Weiss. He's not the product of Lloyd Carr. He's the product of his parents and their spectacular genes.
And this is, again, one of these things that can't take one example and say, aha, this is a trend. Like, no, that's a data point. Like, you have to have a couple different, like, if you have Bill Walsh, you could give Bill Walsh quarterback genius because he had Joe Montana. But also, the backup was also a Hall of Famer, Steve Young. Like, that's someone who could develop quarterbacks. You cannot take, like, well, there was this one guy and he was really good. Okay, now let's control for some variables and and plug some other people in there and see. No, that the same results didn't happen. Okay, well then it probably isn't what you think. The cause is not what you think the cause was.
Yeah, and people point at Andrew Luck and they point at Colin Kaepernick, but point at the Michigan quarterbacks. They regressed the more they're there. Shea Patterson looks like and I didn't watch much of him at Ole Miss, but he is not getting better. He's getting worse. He's getting to the point where he was benched and would have stayed benched if not for Dylan McCaffrey being turned into basically inside out. And his spleen came out of his eyes. And
that was not a great hit at all. That was an extremely targeting. That was one where it was like, normally no one knows what targeting is. Like, nope, that was targeting. Yeah. That was extremely bad.
The first unanimous targeting in football history. And it's just a program that is on the brink at this point. I don't think when we talk about Michigan, it's always like, well, what do you think they should be? And people who think they should contend for national titles are saying Michigan should be something that hasn't been in a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And I think Jim Harbaugh can keep Michigan where it's always been, but he's not the guy that can take them beyond that.
Well, what are they paying him? Are you paying him $7.5 million? Are you paying him $7.5 million to be a 9-3 or 10-2 team? I mean, it seems like you should, if not win a national championship, make the college football playoff. And if not win the college football playoff, at least win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl. And if not win the Rose Bowl, at least win the Big Ten East. Yeah. And they shared the Big Ten East last year. They still have not played in the Big Ten championship game. This is his 5th year. Now you've got one conference loss. Yeah. So you basically need to win out in order to likely get to the Big Ten championship game this year. If you don't do it now, okay, it's been 5 full years. Your whole roster is your players. Yep. The trend is, the trend line from 2016 to the present is not great. I mean, that team peaked in overtime of the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game when they were not very far from stopping J.T. Barrett, but
still far
enough. And I mean, even the play before that, they almost got Curtis Samuel in the backfield. You get Curtis Samuel in the backfield one play earlier. Then Ohio State's kicking a long field goal with a field goal kicker that's missed some kicks. That's if they tackle Curtis Samuel in that play before, that might be enough to get them to Indianapolis. But they didn't make the play. They didn't make the stop on Barrett. And it's been straight into the ground since then. That's
true. That's a good point. Because at this point, he'll have 5 years in. I think it's usually too early to fire coaches after 3 years. They say, well, let them get all of their guys in. Sometimes, like Rich Rodriguez, but after 5 years, I think what the program is. And they'll have plenty of, I guess, evidence as, do we want to keep him? Do we want to move on? I also get the feeling from him, like, I think he would be okay moving on. Like, he does not look like he's having fun. He does not look like he's enjoying himself. He looks miserable anytime you see him. And he's this ultimate competitor, but you also know he likes spending time with his kids and his wife. And you wonder if he would just be like, you know what? I'm just going to spend some time with my family for a few years and just do that.
Well, you just look at him personality-wise. He's just like, go back and watch some of the games from the first year. He's real animated on the sidelines. Against Wisconsin, he was just kind of standing there with this kind of blank look on his face. And is that the stress of losing? Is that the stress of him knowing, like, nope, we had grand plans for this year, and this is not what that was supposed to look like, right. And it's just like the year is already burned. With someone who has played in the NFL that long, you wonder if he's got, that's not great for your body. You're probably aging a little faster than, someone who did not get hit with hit for 15 years or however long he played in the NFL. I mean, that's, and you don't know whether it's some combination of all of those things or pieces of one or two of them, but you just look at him, he's just not the same guy he was 5 years ago. And maybe that's just his confidence is shot. And, he thought, oh, well, certainly I can do this. And then you're kind of figuring out, starting with that Ohio State game last year, like that was just, the Emperor has no clothes and the Emperor has no plan to get clothes at this point. So now what?
I refuse to believe that any of those coaches thought that they had enough to win that game this week. Because, and I know players and coaches always say, you never go in thinking you're going to lose. But I refuse to believe that they thought they could win based on their game plan, their lack of health. I mean, giving the ball to Ben Mason inside the red zone and having him fumble the ball away, it was just a comedy of errors, or maybe I don't know if it was a comedy. I don't know. I'm sure it was a comedy to our listeners, but it was a pretty sad state, and I don't know that they can turn it around. Tom, we'll talk more about Nebraska Thursday.
Say that you put a question mark on the end of that sentence.
I know, but it's because we know I'm not good with my days. We'll talk more about Nebraska Thursday. I wanted to talk more about some of the stuff we heard today, but I got tangented into Michigan. Was there anything you wanted to mention real quick before we get out of here?
Just something for people to spend the next couple days thinking about and dreaming on. Jay Sean Cornell said, what you've seen from Chase Young, like you haven't seen anything yet. Like he's got more that you haven't seen. So when you think about 10.5 sacks last year with 2 bum ankles for like a month and 7 sacks through 4 games, and he's really only played about half of those games, and add in a couple more that he's almost gotten, and then you haven't seen anything yet based on that. Like,
right.
All right. You have my attention.
Yeah. So that'll be fun to watch. So thank you all for listening. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Make sure to check everything out on theozone.net. We've got plenty of stuff coming for this game. It's a big game. We'll have some Nebraska perspectives as well. So make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Got Sloopcast on Mondays, Silver Bullets on Tuesday, us whenever, and then again Sloopcast on Friday as well. So continue to listen, download, rate, review, tell your friends and family, and we will talk to you Thursday.
Tomorrow's all right. We could steal a car and leave.